Hi, I'm Eric Lubau, and welcome to Beyond the Belt. This is a conversation with Stevie Antoniou, a black belt out of Stockholm, Sweden. Stevie is a world traveler, freelance photographer and videographer, documentarian, and wilderness guide. We also had a good discussion about adjusting one's life to chronic illness, specifically Crohn's disease. I hope you enjoy our chat. Hey Stevie, thanks for being
Hey,
here.
thank you. Good to be here.
What was it like for you to get your black belt?
Um, it was pretty surreal, but it was also kind of expected, I would say. Because I'd been around for so long. And as you know, like when you're rolling with other people, you kind of get to feel where you're at, where your level is at. So I mean, I was traveling a lot as a brown belt, so I was rolling with a bunch of different black belts all over the world, and I kind of felt like, okay, I'm getting there pretty soon. Um, I didn't know that I was gonna get it, that specific week or day, so it was still a surprise. And it was during COVID, so it was we didn't train much that year, but in the summer of 2020, I got it, and yeah, that was it.
Did it feel any different for you? Like, I mean, you said you were kind of expecting it, but,
Mm.
I imagine it's probably different when it's actually on you. And then you're like, actually, I feel like now everyone's trying to kill me in a way they weren't before.
No, it's not much different. The biggest difference I would say is the way you're treated at other gyms, I would say, or like you meet someone new and you're a black belt and they're like, oh wow, like they think it's so cool, and for me it's just like it's just another. Obviously, it's what you work for, but it is just another belt, really.
Do you think that was any different for you because you kind of grew up around it? Like, for context, for people who are listening, your dad
Yeah.
owns a gym.
Owns a gym, yeah.
Yeah. And that's where you started, right?
Yeah. Um, that's a good question. Yeah, I think it's probably different for me because I did start when I was 13. I tried it when I was 10, and I didn't like it at all. But then a few years later, I started again, and I loved it. So it probably was different for me because as a kid you see things differently, I guess, and having your dad as your coach, he's just your annoying dad, you know. So it's not for like for other people where it's probably like, oh, it's their professor, their sensei, so on. It was just my dad beating me up every day, you know.
And to be fair, your dad is quite brutal when he beats people up. I also
Yeah.
remember that firsthand.
hmm Yeah, everyone says the same. So I've been seeing it firsthand since since I was little.
Do you feel like that was forced on you? Because you said you started it and then you didn't, then you went back to it. And like, did it feel forced? Did it feel like a
It was
family thing?
actually he tried to get me to try it, and that's when I did when I was like 10, and I didn't like it, and that was like, fine, yeah, you don't have to do it. But then when I was 13, um it was actually my one of my punishments to go train with him because I did some stupid stuff with my friends. I don't know, we got someone to chase us. We threw something at a car or something, or I shoplifted. One of those stupid things I did with my friends. And my punishment was that I had to train with my dad for, I think, 1 or 2 months, and I was miserable because I knew back then I hated it. I was like, fuck, this is so it was the real punishment. But then after I think 3 weeks in, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty fun, and I stuck to it ever since.
Did he change the punishment, or did he allow you to like continue serving out that punishment and just call it a win?
No, we just, yeah, let it go, and that was it.
That's funny. That feels like an easy out, but it was actually, just out of curiosity, was there like an "I told you so" for him in there?
I think I don't think he actually said that, but for sure he was like, I think he kind of knew when he gave me the punishment that I would eventually enjoy it. So I'm sure he's happy. He thought he was real smart doing that.
And considering
But
how,
I'm happy for it as well, of course.
yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is like, it really, you kind of stuck with it, and it's really kind of, you've made a life with it. So it feels like that was a pretty big win.
Yeah, it's been a big part of my life for sure. So yeah, I'm happy, definitely.
When you were growing up around it, did it? feel different to you when, like, a lot of okay, let me be more specific. A lot of us, where we don't have family that are the instructor, for us it's like, okay, we go to work, or we, when we were younger, went to school, and then we would go to the gym, and it was like part of our day. Did it feel different to you as like, oh, this is somewhat familial, like, oh, I have to go to school and then I go see my dad at the gym? Or did it actually feel to you like the way other people describe it, as like a structural part of their day?
I'm not sure. I never really thought much about that part. It was just something that I enjoy doing, and I just kept going, and um, yeah, the training was fun, and like on vacation we would like wrestle at the beach in the pool, so it was always kind of a spare time thing as well.
Is your mom into the picture too with martial arts, or was it just
She did train actually for I think 2 years. She did for a while. Yeah, all of my I have three sisters as well. They all tried it. One of them stuck to it for I think 2 years as well, but none of them train now. It's just me and my dad.
okay? So this is like a bonding thing for you guys as well.
It's been a bonding thing for sure. Yeah. Now we train at different gyms because I live on the south side of the city, and our home gym is in the north, so it's like an hour away. And there's so many gyms in Stockholm now, so there's plenty of places to train, and I still go to the home gym every once in a while just to get some rolls in. So it's good.
Do you feel like having that as part of your childhood made you like a different person? Like having martial arts in your life made you a different person? Like, what do you feel like you took away from it, being part of your childhood?
One, I think it made me more confident for sure. When you're 13, 14, 15, people messing with you or like just I think it just developed my character pretty quickly. And if someone did mess with me, it did happen every once in a while in school. I would just end it right there and, and then, pretty quickly. Yeah, but then also people wanted to test me because they were like, "Oh yeah, Stevie does this. Stevie trains martial arts. You should like test him, the biggest guy in class or whatever." Always wanted to kind of pick on me a little bit and test me, but um, it just ended me, taking him down and taking his back. So it worked out anyways.
You were a lot smaller back then. Like,
hmm
I mean, what did that feel like? Actually, I'm just generally curious. You're not small anymore, but you were small when you started training. Does jujitsu as
Yeah.
a sport feel different to you as a bigger person as opposed to like a smaller person like you were? Like, sorry, how big were you then? Because I like when I remember you as a blue and purple belt versus now as a
Yeah.
black belt.
Yeah. I think I was when I started probably like 55 kilos. Um, and then yeah, up until I think brown belt, I was maybe 65 kilos. So I was always, one of the thinner guys, one of the smaller guys, even though I'm 183 centimeters. So that's pretty, I've always been, really skinny. But looking back at it, it's been a good thing for me because when you don't have that much strength and muscle, you have to you have to develop technique instead. And I did that kind of just subconsciously, I guess. And then when I put on size, now I weigh 81, 82. I put on some size. It's like 15, 16, 17 kilos of a little bit of fat, but mostly muscle. That everything just became so much easier because I already had the technique and I was the brown belt. Then I put on size and I was like, oh my God, this is easy.
Feels like cheating, right?
A little bit, yeah. Because I knew like the techniques and where to go and everything, but I usually couldn't put much force behind it. But when I could put some weight behind what I do, it just, yeah, it was a game changer for sure. And most people do it the other way around, where maybe they're strong, they do some other sport, or they're big and strong, and then they try to learn the technique. But it's really hard to do it that way for sure.
That was kind of me. Former
Yeah,
wrestler. I had the size, I had the strength, but
yeah,
that I got away with being like a little sloppy for, frankly, the majority of
exactly.
my career.
How many years did it take for you to kind of realize where, oh, this is actually the technique that I should be using?
To be honest, I still do it sometimes. as a bigger person who teaches now, I've gotten really, really good at being like, oh, if I use any muscle, I might hurt this person. Like if I'm rolling with
Mm,
a, 55-kilo white belt and she's like her
yeah.
first few weeks, like I've had to be really, really specific. I've also given up a lot of things just to be like, I don't want to hurt someone
Mm,
until I can get more technical. But I would say early purple belt was probably the first time I learned that I'm like, oh, I'm actually just doing all of these wrong, and I just get this because I'm bigger and stronger, even though I can pretend that's not the case.
yeah, yeah. I feel like that's where it takes that much time for most people. Like somewhere at purple belt, most people realize like, oh, this is it's about technique, and then they get it more into a flow.
When I first got my purple belt, I was talking with somebody that we both know, Ben Westrich, and he was explaining that at purple belts where you kind of figure out your own game. And then I got that purple belt and I was like, oh, now I can figure out my own game. And I started doing that. And I realized that most of my own game was based around muscle and like just being physically bigger than people. And then I would try stuff and I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do any of these things if I don't use muscle. And that's when I kind of backed off and was like, okay, if I can avoid using muscle, I'm going to do it at all costs. And then I started getting slowly
Smart.
more.
Yeah, smart.
How did you start? How did you actually get bigger? That's a pretty big jump from
Mm,
55 to 80. I mean, not directly, but
yeah, yeah.
how'd that
But
happen?
I did actually gain, I think it was 16 kilos in maybe 6 months or 7 months. But I was also like somewhere at brown belt in 2019. I got diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So I was always like skinny and small, but somewhere 2019, the winter of 2019, I lost a little bit more weight and I started to feel sick and something was just way off. So I was down to maybe 61 kilos. Um, and then yeah, I got my blood work tested and they just put me in the hospital for the night and they run a bunch of tests and they were like something's really off with your health. And then it took maybe I think a month or a month and a half for them to kind of give me the diagnosis of what it is that I had. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's, and that was like a turning point for me. Um,
Well, just so people listening know, what is Crohn's disease and in what way kind of did it affect you?
so it's an inflammatory bowel disease. So yeah, it causes inflammation in the gut, and it's a chronic disease. So that it's something that I'm gonna live with for the rest of my life. It affects everyone differently, and now I'm living a life that's normal, I would say. Yeah, more normal than most people with Crohn's. So I'm managing it very well, I would say. But it affected me where you can't, I couldn't really digest food properly. I went, to the toilet probably 15 times a day. Yeah, lost weight, didn't have the energy. I slept maybe 14 hours per night, and that didn't really help. But I still needed that sleep. But yeah, it was just a mess. And then at the same, within the span of I think 3 months, I lost my job because I was sick for too long and I didn't have like a permanent position at that firm. So I lost my job, and then my girlfriend at the time also, we were together for almost seven years. She was like, "Oh, I've been thinking about this, this, and this. This is not working." So she wanted a break, and then we ended up breaking up. But it was just like a lot of things changing within the span of 3 months for me. So
That's like all bad things come in threes kind of a
yeah,
situation.
yeah, it was definitely that. So it was just a big turning point in my life where I took probably 6 months of just thinking about myself, my own needs, my health, and not listening to anyone but myself, and just taking the time to kind of figure out what it is I want and need to be healthy and happy. So I just traveled and enjoyed life, and then somewhere along those lines, I kind of figured out what I need for my health, and I started lifting weights more properly, starting taking my diet seriously, and yeah, looking back at it, I'm so happy all that stuff happened because it really shaped me as a person. I was what was I, 23 at the time, 22 or 23.
When you say you started taking steps for your health, what kind of things did you do aside from weightlifting? Was it specific diets? Was it specific like lifting routines? Was it changing the structure of your day? And I assume you mean mental and physical health.
Yeah, definitely both. One is I started saying no to more things. You know, if someone asked me to be at this thing, or if there was a friend that I didn't really feel like hanging out with, I would just say no. And like, no, there's something that I don't feel like it. I'm not going to do it. Or if I really wanted to sleep for 15 hours, I would sleep 15 hours. If I wanted to, you know, do whatever, I would just kind of put my needs first because I was really, really sick, and it was just yeah, a terrible point in my life where I just had to do that for a few months. And to be more specific, it was the diet was I was actually vegan for 3 years. When I met you in St. Bart's, I was vegan, I think,
Yep.
2016.
Yep.
Well, I was a vegan for 3 years, and I'm not saying that was what gave me Crohn's, but I think it was I was a unhealthy vegan for one,
In what
and then
way?
also. Because there's so much processed foods you can eat as a vegan, especially in Scandinavia where there's so many substitutes for meats. So I wasn't eating just, you know, veggies and beans, which is healthy. I was eating, you know, processed soy meats, and you can eat vegan ice creams and crisp and all that stuff and still call yourself a vegan, but it's not healthy. So I was still training and stuff, but not very seriously. But then something just happened with my health. It was a combination of poor diet and a lot of stress from work. So um, yeah, one day I was just sitting at home trying to, you know, recover from the hospital. I got back a few days earlier, and then all of a sudden I felt this big craving for tuna and feta cheese. And it just came out of nowhere. I was sitting in the couch and it was just like, right now you have to get up, go to the supermarket, buy some tuna and feta and just eat it. And I couldn't explain it. It was just like my body was telling me what it needs right now. And as a vegan, I didn't have any cravings for anything. I felt good mentally at least as a vegan. But just something told me that I had to change, and that's what I did. I went bought that tuna, made a salad, and right away my stomach felt better for some reason, like in within an hour. So I experimented for a few months and started eating some fish, some eggs, chicken, and then eventually red meats, and now I eat mostly meat actually. So yeah, it was yeah, a lot of changes within a short period of time.
And you think that the change in diet, in addition to the lifting weights, like that just kind of blew you up, like muscle wise, and yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Also, it is easier with age, I guess, because I tried to gain some weight when I was like, you know, 18, 19, but most people are skinny when they're that age, if they have my kind of body type. But I was a little bit older, like 24, and it was easier because of that. But also, yeah, just the combination of like prioritizing sleep and my health, eating quality foods, and lifting heavy, you know. So it was
What
good.
was the thing that made you aware that you had like a that you had Crohn's disease? Like you said, you were feeling not great, and you were, but like,
Mm.
were you? Was it because clearly you had been going to the bathroom regularly, like a lot in a day, and that didn't kind of tip you off? Was there something specific, like if somebody's listening is like, oh, I have similar problems that they could look for, or is it just go to a doctor?
It was kind of hard to make that call because it was I think it was a long, slow decline in health. It wasn't like from one week to the next. It was probably maybe a span of 2 or 3 months where it was like just a tipping point where I was like, man, I need to get this checked out. And it was, yeah, somewhere around New Year's, I think. I was with my friends and in up north skiing, snowboarding. And I was just yeah going to the bathroom constantly. I didn't have energy to go out with them at night. I went to bed at like 8. So it was really clear, especially when you're with a group of friends that you can't even hang out with, even though I would have loved to. So as soon as I got back from that trip, I booked a doctor's appointment.
And now you feel like much more capable of being ready to play Aquaman when that comes down your way.
Right, definitely.
I saw that picture of you on Instagram with your hair and you were like ready to
Yeah,
play Aquaman in 2030.
yeah, we'll see. I'll have to grow the hair back out.
I mean, you
Uh,
could always get a wig. When you were making this transition and you needed to start taking better care of yourself mentally, like what else were you kind of doing around that? The training and the physical health and prioritizing yourself is certainly part of it, but like, did you do anything for your mental health?
I started reading books. Just yeah, it doesn't really matter the book. I started reading just a bunch of different some self-help books, some novels. I think that helped me a lot getting off social media at least a little bit. I'm still on social media a lot, but reading books.
Any
I
book that
did
you could
try.
recommend?
One book for me is I actually have it right here. Uh, this is one of my favorites for sure. How to
How to
Win
Friends and
Friends,
Influence
and
People. Yeah.
yeah, I love that one. Uh, that one, and then also another good one is Hunter Gatherer's Guide for the 21st Century. That's a really good one. Because he talks about and that's another thing I realized, going through my own fitness journey and so on, is it's not really that hard. We just have to kind of get back to our roots where we need to breathe properly, we need to go get sunlight, eat real food, move our bodies, not sit in boxes all day. We
Yeah.
get into our little car, our box, drive to the next box, sit indoors all day, and that's just what most people do, and it's terrible for our health.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that I don't drink caffeine, and it's not because I'm like, oh, caffeine's bad. I just don't do it. It's just because when I get up in the morning, I usually go for a walk, and that usually
Nice.
takes care of
Yeah.
like waking me up, and
Hmm.
I get the accidental sun when it's actually sunny out, and yeah, that's
Even in Germany?
I found out recently that Berlin has more rainy days than London, and London is the city that everyone thinks
Oh,
is like and
wow.
I that
Yeah.
was quite depressing to find out. But yeah,
Yeah.
you still get sun even when it's not sunny
Yeah.
out. But yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty bad here in Sweden as well, so I get it. Also with the sunlight, it's not great now in the winter.
yeah, and I don't think most people realize how badly not getting sun affects them. They're just like, no, I think I'm going to hang out inside today, and it's like, no, 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 just go outside. You're going to
Terrible.
feel a lot better.
Yeah, even if it's just 10 minutes, it's easy and it does a lot, I think.
Yeah. How did having Crohn's or the how does having the knowledge of Crohn's affect your ability to train, or does it not any?
I would say it does if I don't kind of think about it. There's some things that I need to think about. One is sleep. Like sleep is so important for me right now. And it's been ever since I was diagnosed. So I started sleeping way more after I got diagnosed. So now I have a minimum of 8. If I don't get 8 hours, I'm a wreck. So I'll happily sleep, 9 or 10 if I can. But training, I can train. But if I have like a rough session at the gym that's heavy, I'll definitely have a nap in the afternoon.
I'm very pro nap, so I
Yeah,
very much support that.
yeah. But some people are like, oh no, I just need 5.5 hours. I'm good to go. Cup of coffee. But yeah, that's not me.
I mean, honestly, that sounds not too far from me, except minus the coffee.
Yeah.
If I am in good shape and I eat well, I don't eat well as often as I should, but if I'm in good shape and I eat well, I'm like 6 hours of sleep and I wake up without an alarm and I don't really
Wow.
need. Yeah, I'm very
Crazy.
grateful. Like knock on wood, like I'm very fortunate that I have that much of my health.
It's
After
good you get a
years
few
of
you get a few more hours in the day then.
it adds up. It adds up. I still can't speak as many languages as I want, but it's still like I have more time to not do them, procrastinate.
What languages are those?
So English I speak poorly, as you can tell. I used to be conversational in French. It's gone down since I don't use it that often. I can understand it. I can't speak it as well. Since I live in Germany, my German's getting slowly and painfully better, but German is a very difficult language. And I spent like 6 months trying to learn Chinese, and I actually find it to be not that difficult. I just haven't don't
Really?
use it enough because Chinese
Yeah.
grammar construction is so much simpler than any other language that I've had to learn.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's not what I hear from most people, but
Well, it's hard to
good
hear
for
it
you.
and to hear the intonations and read it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the grammar construction is actually quite simple. It's like when you listen to Chinese. people talk and they're like, I go now or I go tomorrow. That's the grammar
Mm,
construction in Chinese just converted to English. And
makes
because
sense.
they don't have the progressive or the similar progressive structures of most of the Germanic languages, the grammar construction's easier. So yeah, it's more complicated than that. But like generally speaking, I had a
Generally, yeah.
relatively easy time, comparatively easy time.
You're gonna get fluent, you think?
I will actually. I would like to. I just want to finish getting to a point where I can be more like consistently able to just drop into and out of German before I start another language. Because if I feel like if I start another language, then the languages get mixed up in my brain. Like I'm not a natural linguist, so it's well, you speak what, three or four, like
No, no, no. So Swedish, English, is all I'm fluent in, and then I've tried to learn Spanish, because I've traveled a bit in Colombia, Mexico, Guatemala, Panama. And I love that part of the world, so I'm still trying to learn. So because it's so much easier to travel in those countries if you can actually speak to people, because yeah, most people don't speak English.
what brought you over there?
Um, I'm not sure what it was that, because I've always loved to travel, as you know, but it was just a part of the world that I hadn't been in. And I first trip was, yeah, Panama, I think, Panama and Colombia. And it was just, yeah, unexplored for me. And I ended up spending 3 months over there, and I absolutely loved it. You know, the food, the people, everyone's so friendly. And even like before the trip, people were worried, like, oh, you're gonna go to Colombia? Are you worried you're gonna get robbed? You're gonna get killed, kidnapped? I was like, it'll be fine. And it definitely was. Like, one thing I've realized traveling is that most people are good. Like, if you watch the news, you're gonna think most people are terrible. But if you actually go and travel, see the world, most people are definitely good. They're just normal people wanting to live normal lives.
When like how do you choose your next trip? What's your like? Do you like close your eyes and like point a spot on the map or throw darts or
Almost, yeah. Sometimes, I, like in what 50 years, I want to be able to say that I've seen most of the world at least. We'll see, but that's my goal. So there's been some trips where it's just like, okay, I have maybe 2 3 months next winter, because yeah, the winter in Sweden is pretty terrible, especially in Stockholm. If you're gonna spend the whole winter in Stockholm, so I always try to get out for a few weeks at least. So there's been a few trips where I just look at, I'm on Google Maps and just like, oh, what's this country? And then I just zoom in and look at some things. So Myanmar was one of those for me, where it was just like, oh, it's right next to Thailand, but I've never heard of anyone being to Myanmar. I don't know anything about this country. I just started Googling a little bit, and seemed like a cool place to go. So we just booked tickets and went, and it was one of my favorites ever.
what made it your favorite? Like what about it was memorable?
I think one was there was always almost no tourists over there. Because I think they opened up their borders like 2013 or something to tourists. So people were really surprised to see tourists, and whatever cafe or restaurant we went to, we were the only tourists, which was a pretty cool feeling because it wasn't in an unsafe way. It was just they were just interested, and like they really they came up to me, even though they didn't speak English, most of them. The ones that could, they told us like, oh, thank you for coming to our country and so on. And then just yeah, traveling in that country was just so full of surprises. There was just we didn't know anything. I never talked to anyone who'd been there before. There's not many videos online, so yeah, it was a really really cool trip in that way, full of surprises.
That's cool. Like I mean, do you have any other places where you were like, oh, this is new, this was unexpected, or is it kind of all like that for you?
Yeah, I mean, every country is different, and all countries have their own kind of charm, I would say. But it's mostly about the people, because you can go to a place and it's going to be a terrible time or a good time, depending on who you meet, usually, or who you hang out with, you know? So it's not just about the food and, having sun and a pina colada in the hammock.
That is the reason some people travel. I'm sure, but I
Yeah, but
agree.
that's vacation though. That's vacation usually. That's not traveling in the same way.
How do you
If
make
you
that
go,
distinction?
I would say, vacation, that's when you go to you have a hotel for a few weeks and that's your vacation for the year. That's your traveling for the year. But traveling for me, it's more, exploring and actually talking to locals, trying new unexpected things. That's traveling for me.
Is there any like lesson that stands out for you, or some memory that's like, oh, when I think about this like really hits my heart for travel?
Uh, that's a good question. I think, yeah, most it's not a specific moment, but I think looking back at all my travels, it's been every time I've been in some kind of trouble or I need help from someone, have always been there. Like my car broke down in New Zealand, and people were like going out of their way to go get a new battery for me, or uh, when we were in, I think, was it Colombia? We got ripped off by some asshole, but another local came to help us. So there's always like friendly people helping out, even though you're completely different. They just see you as a tourist maybe, but they're still, friendly, and they can recognize you as a, fellow human being.
I think that's a good way to look at like life. Is like, hey, we're all just human
hmm
beings and we're all trying. And I think the world would be a better place if we all kind of looked at each other like that a little.
Definitely, yeah. That's why I encourage people to travel, especially young people. I think that's the best thing a young person can do is go traveling because you'll get perspective on life. And yeah, as I said, I have three younger sisters. I always, nag them about going traveling. They're not anywhere near as got the travel bug as me, but yeah, we'll see. The youngest one is 18, so I've got hope for her.
What do you? Is there something when you were young that made you want to have that travel bug, or is that just kind of who you are as a person?
I think is for me, um, it was just an escape. I think a little bit from home because yeah, I think a lot of people, especially in the big city here in Stockholm, a lot of people are focused on, having a nice car, working a 9 to 5, and prioritizing money and a normal life, so to say. But I realized quickly that that wasn't for me. So I always tried to find ways of getting out of there. And yeah, seeing the world was my kind of escape from that. And yeah, it's not something that I realized until maybe I think this year actually. It was like, oh, maybe all my traveling this year, it's been great and it's been awesome, but it was also me kind of escaping from some trouble I had back home, or yeah, me escaping from some of my own problems, I would say. So it's been really good, and I'm super happy for because I did it, but it's also good to kind of face your problems back home as well, I realized.
Is that what you're doing now?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I haven't traveled as much. I mean, I've still been to maybe, what is it, 5 countries this year.
It's a lot.
But for me, that's not much because I was used to having like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 trips per year for, yeah, a lot of years. But now, so it's just been small trips this year. Like I went to Italy. I spent 2 weeks in Morocco. So just, yeah, shorter trips. But yeah, now I'm spending more time at home and I'm really enjoying it. So I'm renting a nice cabin here with my girlfriend, by the sea and by the woods. So I'm really enjoying Stockholm for once.
Is that why you got into like the wilderness stuff in Stockholm? Is that to give you like time around home where you're still getting to explore, but not necessarily traveling for that exploration?
Actually, it's not, that's not why I got into it, but I've realized that Stockholm is awesome, because of the work that I had. So, yeah, I've done freelance photography and video for a few years, but yeah, 2 years ago, the winter was kind of rough finding work. So I didn't have, enough money to pay the bills. So I started looking for other work. I was getting ready to, work in a warehouse, carrying boxes or whatever. But then an ad for a wilderness company guiding came up on Facebook, and I was like, oh, th this might be better for me, like, extra work. So I applied and I got the job right away. What we do is we do kayaking, moose safari, hikes, and yeah, a bunch of other things with some other guides. But those are the three that I do, and we do them for tourists. So they come to Stockholm, they book this with us, and what I realized is that Stockholm is awesome because I got to see Sweden and Stockholm from their perspective. Because growing up here, I took it for granted. That's what I realized. The forest, the lakes, the sea, I took it for granted. And then when you get to see it from their perspective, people from, the States, people from Japan, or people coming from Africa, Spain, wherever, they were just amazed by the nature. And yeah, it made me realize, like, oh, my home is actually pretty awesome as well. So I don't have to travel as much.
Is there any like particularly memorable experience that you had with somebody that you're like, oh wow, this person really made me see something in a new light?
I think it's been the general kind of reactions from people that made me realize it. Um, because again, we were talking about the hunter-gatherer's guide to the 21st century, not spending much time indoors and getting sunlight. Because most people, their vacation, maybe for the tourists at least, their vacation might be Stockholm, and they have 1 week or 2 weeks, and that's it, their whole year. So when they come here, they maybe, yeah, they have some time off work, but they rarely get out into the woods, or they don't cook over fire, and do all these things. And when you're out there, we're in the forest, and so what we do is we pick them up in the city center. We drive maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes tops, to a place. And Stockholm is like that. Wherever you drive, north, south, west, east, you'll find beautiful nature. And say kayaking, for example, I'll encourage people to ditch their shoes and go barefoot instead, and then we'll make fire for lunch. So I'll teach them, how to make fire with fire steel instead of using a lighter. And that's the first time most people do that, and they're so amazed, like, oh my God, I did it! And then I'll tell them, like, the harder you work for the fire, the better your food is gonna
That
taste.
is very
Okay,
true,
that's
actually.
yeah. Right? So if you use one of those methods instead of a lighter, it's going to taste better for sure.
So you're like really living through people's excitement and frankly, like the first time a lot of them actually realize that they're capable of doing these things.
Yeah, yeah. One, capable, and also for a lot of them, it's the first time they're being in an actual forest.
I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah,
Yeah, because most people don't go out in the forest.
yeah,
Most people think maybe they'll go for a walk with their dog in like a paved, a road in the forest, or
yeah.
like a gravel road in the forest. But being out in, real nature is kind of different. So we'll do these kind of we call them forest baths, where we stop maybe mid-hike, and I'll tell people to take off their shoes if they want. That's what I do, at least. I'll leave my shoes, and then we kind of spread out in the woods, and then we'll do maybe 10, 15 minutes of just people spend time on their own in the woods, and I'll tell them to kind of, see what you can smell, see what you can hear, maybe close your eyes and just listen. And they were barefoot in the forest in the middle of, in the middle of Sweden, which is, for most people, the highlight of their trip, which is
It's
cool.
so fascinating because I feel like for me, that's a thing I've been doing since I was a kid in a lot of
Mm,
ways. Even though I live in cities now, I always spent a ton of time in nature. And I didn't really think about the fact that for most people, like that might be the first time they ever do that.
yeah,
And
definitely.
you get to be the person who witnesses that and sees that like childlike excitement.
Yeah, because that's what it is. They're like children again. They're like, walking around barefoot in the forest, and they're laughing, and no music, no, no phones usually, and yeah, it's a good time for sure.
Do you ever tie that in with any of the like photography or videography work, or is that these are like two separate things in your life?
They're quite separate. I've tried to get the company to kind of, hire me to do photography stuff on the side, but I've done photography for long enough where it's kind of nice to not bring the camera as well. Yeah, it was all I did for a few years when I was, 20, 21, 23. And now it's work. It's fun still, but yeah, when I'm out in the forest, I'd rather not bring the camera, especially when I have to, keep track of guests and keep track of safety and so on.
Yeah. Oh, I imagine like people's safety. It's like there's probably times where you're like, hey, I'm surprised I have to tell you not to touch that, but don't touch that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, I haven't thankfully had any accidents
Yeah.
at
Knock on
work, but
wood.
I've had
Yeah.
some colleagues, yeah, knock on wood. But I've had some colleagues that had some incidents where, people slip on a rock and they have to call a chopper to go get
Oof,
them,
yeah.
or someone breaks their or maybe hurts their shoulder kayaking and they have to, tow them all the way back through the sea. So, but yeah, I've been lucky so far, and it's been good.
How did you get into the photography thing?
Um, I what was it actually? Yeah, I was maybe 18, 19. I just got back from a long trip in Australia, New Zealand. I was gone for I think 6 months. I got back and then yeah, I was really broke. I had to find work and I started applying for a bunch of different sales positions in stores. And I got two of them actually. So I worked in a uh, hiking wilderness store, and also a electronics warehouse. And I had done a lot of photography, or like, yeah, I guess you could call it photography with a GoPro during my trips. And that's what the my employer saw when I applied. But I knew nothing about cameras. But they thought it was good enough to put me in the camera section, where we had, big, expensive DSLRs. And I was 18, 19, didn't know anything about cameras or sales for that matter. But they just put me there because they thought it was a good fit. And I was like, oh my God, how am I going to sell this, 2,000 euro camera? I don't know anything about this. So it ended up me just buying a camera to one of the cheapest ones to kind of learn what I was supposed to sell. So I tried to get into it a little bit. I was watching YouTube. And it was just, yeah, same thing as Jiu-Jitsu, I would say. Just a few weeks in, I was like, oh, this is pretty awesome. Maybe I can keep doing this. And I think it was maybe 6 months in, I was like, oh, this is maybe I can combine this with traveling and make a living off this somehow. And that's yeah, what I ended up doing.
Did you feel like you were at a disadvantage because you didn't have a lot of technical knowledge about cameras and lighting and stuff like that, or did it just feel
No,
like
not
it
at
wasn't
all.
relevant?
No, it's not relevant because there's the technical part is actually the easy part of photography, I would say. Especially, YouTube. That was my kind of every day, every morning before work, I would, put on two or three YouTube videos while eating breakfast, and you get all that technical knowledge pretty quickly. So it only took, a few months to dial that in. But then it's the artistic side of it that's the hard part, the emotional part of it, which is yeah, the hard part for sure.
That's so fun. Like the you say, oh, it was easy to learn the technical part. I just watched a couple of YouTube videos every day. I don't think that that level of dedication to learning something is a natural skill that most people have. I feel like it was
No?
probably because you're like, oh, I just stuck to jujitsu for so many years and I chipped away at the problem. And you're like, I have a method for learning really complicated things. And then you just
Oh,
naturally applied
that's
it.
not what I said though. That's not what I said. I mean, yeah, if I was to learn, say, math or any science stuff, I would be terrible at it, I'm sure. So for me, it's just if something's fun, then it's easy
Yeah.
usually. So there's been a few things like that where, jiu-jitsu, photography, even though it's a complicated thing, if you spend a lot of time on it and you enjoy the process, I think it is pretty easy to learn. At least it was for me. But any other like, math problem or science or I don't know, I can't think of any other example, but
It's okay.
yeah, that's then it would be way harder for sure.
So did you feel like the emotional thing, the emotional side of it was natural to you? Or was that
Not at
something
all.
you had to
No,
learn as
no.
well?
That's something I'm still working on a lot. That's the hardest part, I think. And that it's been interesting observing that the technical part usually comes naturally for men. Usually, not always, but usually that's a kind of, men like love to geek out on, oh, what lens do you have? This is f2.8, blah blah blah. And then whereas female photographers, they don't give a shit about the technical part, but they're way better, and it comes naturally to them, the emotional part where, if they're taking portraits, they're usually way better at portrait photographers, women, because they can have a connection with the person they're shooting more naturally, at least. And then maybe they struggle a little bit more with the technical side. So that's been a fun kind of observation through colleagues and other people, of friends I've met that do photography.
How are you working on the emotional part? Like, what are you doing to help you get better?
I, I'm not sure what to do, honestly. It's still one of the hardest sides to it for sure. That's what I'm struggling with, because the technical side is like I've got it dialed down, as good as, I mean, it's good enough for me. But the emotional part, I try to like look at some of the famous portrait photographers, for example. And what they do is, I found that they sometimes, if they have a shoot going, they'll, put the camera aside, talk to the person for 5 minutes before they even take one picture. So I try to do some of that stuff, or if I have, a wedding shoot, I'll try and, make a little bit more of a connection with the couple, and tell them, just relax. It's just us here, and we'll work this out. It's my job to make you look good, so you don't have to worry, and just kind of talk to them a little bit more, because just focusing on the technical and the composition, and like, oh, move your head a little bit here, and maybe let me change the settings, the lighting, because yeah, the emotional part is just as important, if not more, I would say.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I always assume that the technical and the sort of I guess emotional part go hand in hand, but I wouldn't have thought that there is such a distinction. I would have thought that like you can sort of flow between one and the other. Have you asked other folks like how they do the emotional side of things?
I've asked, yeah, and it's been a conversation I've had with some people, and that's why what I found is that, yeah, there's a little bit of a difference between men and women that way. But yeah, I think the technical part it just kind of comes naturally now. It's kind of like jujitsu. When you do a technique, you don't really think about, step one, two, three. You just kind of do it after a few years. So the technical part is just there, and then I'm focusing mainly on the emotional part now.
Does that apply for videography as well? Or
Definitely, yeah.
is it a similar sort of technical emotional gap between photography and videography?
Similar, definitely, yeah. If not more in video, because photos, it's kind of easy. The process, I would say, is easier in the way that you can just, talk while you're doing something, and you just snap a few pictures in between the conversation. Whereas with video, depending on, what you're shooting, you have to have the whole process, because if you're talking mid-video, you ruin the video. So so yeah, depending on what you're shooting, it can be way harder, actually, with video.
Do you have a favorite photo where you're like, man, I nailed that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I have it printed to so many friends. My dad has one hanging in his house. It's like this big, and it's a portrait from Myanmar, actually, where we were in this village. We were biking, actually, from, yeah, one of the bigger cities to the next, city that was kind of smaller, but there was like a little village in between where we spent the night. So we were biking through the mountains of Myanmar, and then we were exhausted from, yeah, biking all day in the heat. We were sleeping on the floor in these little bungalows in a, yeah, poor village, and we were taking a walk at sunset. And I just see this man who was standing in his backyard, burning garbage or something. I just see him from maybe 100 meters away. I was like, oh my God, I have to take a picture of that guy. And so I start walking across, the field of whatever he was growing. I walk towards him, and I try to put on a big smile, and like ask him, can I take a picture of you? And he didn't know what I was saying, but I like pointed at the camera, gave a big smile, and he was like, yeah, sure. Or he said something in his language. And what he was doing is he had like a towel wrapped around his head, big like a turban almost. He was smoking a big cigar made up out of a leaf, and he was just like such a character, like lanky older guy with like so much character in his face. And yeah, he was smoking this cigar, and yeah, it was sunset, and yeah, he was laughing, and he thought it was a cool process as well. I showed him the pictures, and I was like, "Oh, you look like Brad Pitt," and he was like, "Ah." So yeah, but that picture was yeah, I'll send it to you,
Yeah. Did you
and you can have a look.
did you ever get him a copy of that? Like, do you have an address where you were able to like send him a picture?
No, I've been thinking about it, but there's like almost first off, no one speaks English, and there was no address. It was just like a random village in the mountains, so I have no idea how to get it to him.
That would be like a crazy pilgrimage. You just take this picture and you like figure out how to get to where it was and you just like
That's what
present it to
I
him.
need to do, I think. Yeah.
That would
Maybe I'll do that in 10 years, and hopefully he's still there.
that would be a cool documentary. Like, like bringing
Yeah,
your
that's
favorite
true.
picture back to the person for whom it
Oh my
was the
God.
subject.
Yeah. And I just walk around the village like, do you know this
Yeah,
guy? Have you seen
exactly.
him?
I think that would be a great doc. I would watch
It's a,
that documentary.
I'm gonna write that down. That's a good idea. I love that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. If you get nothing else from this conversation, you have like a future project out of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite video that you did? Like, I mean, clearly that picture, that photo meant a lot to you, but
Yeah,
video?
that photo. A video. I think maybe one or both documentaries that I've done. The because yeah, I did the one documentary for Globetrotters that meant a lot. Um, and it's my favorite in a way that it was just like the whole experience for me was so cool. You know, traveling to we did I think 12 countries in 12 months filming that whole documentary for BJJ Globetrotters. But then I did another documentary for a short documentary for a company here in Sweden actually who helps stray dogs finding new homes.
That documentary was absolutely heart wrenching. Like, as somebody
Did you
who,
watch
yeah,
it?
oh, yes, as somebody who loves dog, like I recently had to
Yeah,
put my dog down in May, and he was he was with me for 15 years,
yeah.
and I purposely avoid going to dog shelters because if I walk
Mm,
into a shelter, I'm going to walk out with 50 dogs. And I watched that, and I was like in tears at the
yeah.
end of it. I just, how do you even do that and not just end up in tears every night?
I know, yeah. There were I was crying quite a bit during that process for sure. So yeah, for those listening, what we did was I was hired by this company who does dog food, and they were having a collaboration with a company, a nonprofit, Hundar utan hem in Sweden, Dogs Without Homes. So what they do is they rescue dogs from Poland and Ireland. So the idea with the short documentary was we fill up a truck with dog food and we drive to Poland. We kind of, yeah, document the process of how they actually rescue a dog and bring them to Sweden to find a home. So yeah, we fill up the truck, drive to Poland. We visit three dog pounds, and at one of them there was, I think, 700 dogs in cages, and all they get fed is, pasta, and they almost never get walks. They just sit in the cage with their own shit on the floor. So it's just terrible conditions, and yeah, it was heartbreaking. And it's so loud when you're in the dog pound. It's, imagine 700 dogs just barking, and it's yeah, it was intense for sure. And I had to keep a straight face and do my job as a cameraman, but it was hard.
I had to pause that I think 3 or 4 times to like gather myself to watch the rest of it. I can't
Yeah.
even imagine being there and doing that.
Well, I appreciate the reaction because that's what we were going for. So that means I did a good job, I think.
I think fortunately or unfortunately you nailed it. I'm
Yeah.
absolutely going to link to that video in the show notes, and I hope other people take a few moments to watch that. It's not super long, but it is very
Yeah, I think it's
intense.
18 minutes,
Yeah.
18 minutes. And yeah, I'm proud of that project because it was for a good cause. It was a really cool trip, and I got a lot of insight in how that whole process takes place. And yeah, they're doing great work at Hundred.
Yeah, that was That's a lot. Like just thinking back to it for watching it last week, I was like,
Yeah,
very, very intense. I actually switched back to rewatching the Globetrotters
yeah,
one because I was like, I need to get myself out of this headspace so I can.
yeah. It's like the complete opposite, especially the beginning where we're just like partying in Austria or
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it was good times.
So what was your main takeaway from doing that Globetrotters video? I mean, as somebody who's been a part of that Globetrotters, you've been in Christian's orbit, as have I, for the better part of
Mm.
a decade, probably almost a decade at this point. What was your takeaway from doing that?
I think my biggest takeaway was that there's so many different ways of living your life. You just kind of have, yeah, because I don't want to, spoil the ending, but it has kind of a sad backstory, Globetrotters,
Yeah, it
why
does.
Christian started it. It kind of puts everything in perspective because it just made me kind of realize like, oh, there's no time to waste. You just have to go. And yeah, obviously seeing Christian, what he does was a huge inspiration, and he put so much trust in me as a young videographer because I had no idea how to film a documentary. I'd barely made a few, shitty videos for like promo videos for some traveling stuff. So for me, they were terrible. But Christian saw something, and he was like at a camp. He was like, "Oh, Stevie, come! I have an idea I want to talk to you about." And he was like, "Oh, do you want to come to all the camps next year and film a documentary for me?" And there was no hesitation. I was just, "Yes, let's go."
What kind of prep work did you do, not having had a ton of experience doing that?
I tried watching videos on YouTube, whatever I could find, but I didn't find much helpful content, to be honest. Um, so yeah, there wasn't much prep work. I think that's my answer. Because Christian, he was just like, okay, do your thing, and he just put total trust in the process, and we had no plan. He was just like film everything and do whatever you like with it. And then the whole project kind of shaped into what it became as we went along. So I think probably 8 camps in, we kind of had an idea of what it would be. But the first couple of camps, I was just filming everything and I had no idea what it was going to become, really.
I would say after watching those two documentaries and then juxtaposing that about against your earlier statement of not quite having a handle on how to do the emotional side of things, I kind of maybe question your self-assessment capabilities because I feel like both of those two documentaries quite heavily captured a pretty intense emotional
Yeah,
perspective.
I appreciate that. Uh, yeah, I mean, as I said, for me, it's the part that I feel not so great at, but obviously I still have something there. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to make a living off of this. Not documentaries, but photography and the art form that I do in general. But it's still, the part that I'm trying to get better at, and the part that I find hard. Um,
Have you thought about making a little bit of content about how to make a documentary and seeing if that either helps you explore the process for yourself or maybe just helps other people who are up and coming figure out the things that you struggled with?
I haven't thought about documentaries specifically. I've thought about having some basic courses in photography, videography. Christian was actually the one that pitched that idea. Uh, and I did have some photography classes at camps for a few of them. But yeah, I've just been kind of occupied with my own work and making a living off of this because that's hard enough as it is. I just feel like I haven't had time I haven't put in the effort to make a channel and put out that type of content because it is a lot of work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that was actually going to be one of the things I was going to ask is like, do you have any advice for people who want to make a living off of photography or videography because you've to some extent done it, and that's a thing that
Mm.
most people can't even fathom. Like, how do I do this, or where do I go, or where do I get started? Like, what would be some advice you have for that?
I would say, watch hundreds of hours on YouTube. That's kind of the first step. That's what I did at least, because there's so much free. free information, free education on there, and there's so many good people, um, yeah, putting out stuff for free that's really quality advice, quality work that they do, and they show you exactly how to do it. So it's I would say it's easier now than ever. You can even do it on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. So that's the first step, and then kind of yeah, just saying yes to everything, doing stuff for free at first. Because you can't expect to make a living off of it within the first 2 years, I would say. It took me 2 years to take out my first salary from my company. So I was working with other stuff on the side, and then after 2 years, I could, take out a little bit of money. And I'm like, oh my God, it's finally happening. And then ever since, it's been ups and downs. I've been doing it for, I think, 8 years now, or 9 years even. I started my company 9 years ago, and there's still some months that are really rough. Um, but yeah, that I think that's my advice. Just starting somewhere, doing a lot of it, spending a lot of hours on it.
Did you feel like you got burned out at all during the Globetrotters filming? I mean, you did 12 countries, 12
Mm,
camps, and then you had all that recording and editing. Was there any
yeah.
level of burnout that you felt either around the documentary, around jujitsu, around traveling, or was it just, hey, I can't believe I get to live this life?
Yeah, I think it was kind of the opposite. I think that was maybe my savior actually. Because traveling, especially the first couple of months, because I got Crohn's and I filmed the first camp the same month. So yeah, the first one was in January, and then we had one in the Castle camp in March or April, I think, or May maybe. But yeah, the first couple of camps was really rough because all I was doing was I didn't train at those camps almost anything. I was just sleeping 14, 15 hours a night, getting up to film, the bare minimum that I had the energy for. But then it got easier as time went on, and yeah, I was just focused on doing this because I could have, I guess I could have called everything off because of my health. It would have been a valid reason, but I also took note of the fact that I was like, I'm not gonna get this chance again. It's now or never. When am I gonna get a chance like this again? So I just kind of pulled through, and it was so much fun as well. So it wasn't really that hard to pull through because I had so much freedom, and there were so many good people around at the camps. And when I got healthier in the summer, then it was just yeah, all good.
Do you have any, just out of curiosity, do you have any like stats about the film? As in, like, you had X number hundreds of hours of footage. You did X numbers of hundreds of hours of editing. Like anything like that?
I think I counted the amount of the hours, but I can't remember. It's been a few years, but I think it was 2 terabytes of footage at least. So 2,000 gigs of footage, and then yeah, the timeline was just crazy long. Maybe I can find a screenshot somewhere and send it to you. But yeah, it was a lot of work, and Christian is somewhat of a perfectionist as well. So he was on top of me, and just like changing everything, and not changing everything, but changing stuff around to make it,
His
to
vision.
his vision.
Yeah.
Yeah, his vision. But I'm happy he did because it turned out great, and the response was amazing as well.
Yeah, I got to be there for the premiere, one of the premieres in Heidelberg, at the
That's the one
cinema.
that I couldn't go to because I had COVID.
Yeah. Yeah, I was bummed that I didn't get to see. I was very
Yeah,
curious to watch you watching everyone else.
I know it was surreal.
But in the end, we just had like two naked guys in the corner of the front of the screens. Without naming names, I'm sure you could take a pretty good guess at least one or the two of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Um,
think I could do both. Yeah.
yeah, I assumed you could. Yeah, that, I mean, that was such a, it was nice for me to see because I also have, again, known Christian since 2016, and to see this kind of thing represented, his vision in
Mm.
sort of long form but short form, not having to have everyone show up to a camp to understand how he viewed the world, was kind of
Yeah,
cool.
and also I think it was really good that he showed kind of that vulnerable side and the kind of dark side of everything as well, because
Yeah.
it's not about all, the partying and the traveling and that's the fun part of it, but the fact that it did come from something like a dark place is meaningful, I think, to a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm going to link to it in the show notes, and I hope anybody who's listening who hasn't seen it takes the time to watch it, because I think if not only for me, not only seeing the way other people reacted to it was like somewhat moving, but also knowing that there's people who don't realize that this is an escape for them, even if it's a
Mm,
momentary one, that it doesn't
yeah.
have to be coming from a positive place for them to have a positive experience and to create positive experiences for other people.
Definitely.
Cool, man. I I'm really glad you made that documentary because I think for me it was great to see, and I think a lot of people got a lot of value from that, and I think a lot of people didn't quite understand how important or beautiful the thing that Christian has built is without that
Yeah.
documentary. They just got their slice of, oh, I go there for 5 days and I do some jujitsu and I meet some cool people, but that really
Yeah.
kind of shined a light on how Christian views the world.
Yeah, definitely. I've been trying to get Christian to do, part two at some point, but I'm not sure what the story there will be, but we'll see.
I think it just needs to happen. I think something else needs to happen. I think the whatever the new iteration of the camps, he's still doing a lot of the same ones, which are wonderful and still a great experience for people. But I think at some point he's going to turn a corner, and then there'll be a part two that'll make much more sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you, you've been through a lot in your life so far. You've been to a lot of countries. You've done a whole mess of jobs. Is there any kind of advice that you wish everybody knew? Is there any piece of advice that you'd like to share with everyone?
I think it links together quite well with what I said on me being thankful for all those, terrible things that happened. Because looking back at it, I am thankful. And I would say it's just, doing hard things is good for you because I think most people are, or a lot of people are, they're so comfortable, and everything today is about comfort and you just making things easier. But that's I don't think that's the way we're supposed to live. We're not supposed to have everything super easy and smooth all the time. So yeah, I think that's the advice that I have for people is do hard things because it'll translate into an ability to do hard things. So when other things come up, you'll have the tools to manage those as well.
I feel like that's a great piece of advice. I think I agree. I don't think a lot of people are willing to push themselves out of their comfort zone, and that's a that's a
Yeah,
good piece of advice.
even if it's a small thing, it doesn't have to be, something crazy, but that's one of the reasons I love ice baths, for example, because it sucks. Going up in the morning, going into the sea that's freezing, it sucks. But even if I go in for 2 seconds, that's a win for me because I could have stayed in bed in my warm bed by the fire. So
There's a bunch of saunas here in Berlin. One of them is like a spa, and then there's like this cool little yurt sauna that I go to probably once or twice a month with
nice.
some of my friends. And there's an ice bath in there.
Like a tub?
Yeah, just
Yeah,
a big tub.
yeah.
And I usually go in there for between 2 and 3 minutes in that
Wow,
ice
that's
bath.
good.
Yeah, and I always try to find buddies, and people will just jump in, and then they'll be like, we did it after like 5 seconds. I'm like, but
Yeah,
and so I'm just sitting there often alone and with myself. And the only person who usually goes in there and will stay in one of the ice baths with me is Vanessa, my wife, who you know.
yeah, yeah,
One of the only people who's like that tough and stupid to sit in an ice bath with me for like 3 minutes and just
yeah.
breathe in the air and be like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And then you feel good about it.
Yeah, you feel great afterwards. You never regret it. So yeah, most people don't just don't want the uncomfort.
Yeah, I think it's a good mental fortitude challenge, and also I feel physically so much better when I do it.
Same. Yeah. There's a lot of benefit, and whether the science backs it up yet or not, I think I feel great at least doing it, and especially the mental part. Just yeah, doing that it translates to the ability to do other hard things,
I'll take the
I
placebo
think.
effect, even if there's no other thing besides the
Right?
positive placebo effect, if
Same.
that's it.
Yeah.
What are you excited for in the future?
Uh, I'm getting to the point where I'm more excited about, exploring my backyard and home and maybe starting a family, those kind of things. You just, settling down a little bit because I've had so many crazy years of traveling and doing all these things. So yeah, and now right now I'm just kind of really happy to be at home for once. I've never felt that way before. So now I'm kind of excited for, more of a normal life.
That's kind of a beautiful change in sentiment from running from home to being like, oh no, this is actually my home and now I want to explore it.
Mm, yeah, definitely. I just had to go to what is it, 38 countries to realize that.
Everybody's on their own journey, and I don't want to pretend to tell anybody that, hey, you got
Yeah,
everything at home, because we all kind of walk our own path and figure it out where however long it takes us or whatever dumb or smart thing we need to do to get there.
definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I'm thankful.
Yeah, that's cool. I think it's probably that's a good note to kind of wrap it up on.
Yeah, sure.
Is there anything that you'd like to promote?
Maybe, yeah, just maybe the two documentaries that we were talking about, the one for BJJ Globetrotters and the one for Hunder which is Dogs Without Homes in Swedish. They're yeah doing amazing work, as I said, and give them a follow. If you're in Sweden and want to adopt a dog, that's where you go.
That's a good shout out. I very much support anybody who can take that kind of responsibility on themselves. And there's clearly a lot of dogs who could use that support after watching that documentary.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do next year, maybe get a dog. Because yeah, it goes better with not traveling as much,
Yes.
then I can take care of a dog.
And it situates you at home a lot more, and you start having timelines that you weren't used to. Like, okay, how long can the dog be alone or
Yeah,
hold their pee or whatever? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Stevie. I really appreciate your time today. This was such a fun conversation, and I'm glad we got a chance to reconnect a little bit.
Likewise. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about traveling, photography or videography, wilderness guides, or living with Crohn's disease, feel free to reach out to Stevie directly. If you find yourself near Stockholm, Sweden, find Stevie for a role. You can find his contact information and websites in the show notes. And as always, thank you for your time and attention.